This is a true story that happened in Lagos. When Deborah the maid first came to Bola's house, everyone thought she was an angel. She did everything perfectly, never made a mistake. But they had no idea she was far from an angel. One morning, Bola walked into the baby's room and froze. Becky was sitting there, playing with her 6-month-old daughter, but she was not human. Horns, a beast-like leg, a tail, and glowing red eyes staring right at her. What happened next was beyond terrifying. Turn on the notification bell to be the first to watch this unbelievable true life story. Watch till the end. Bola, the CEO of UnHuman Tech Solutions, had everything most people dreamed of: a thriving business, a loving husband, and 4 beautiful children, 2 boys and 2 girls. But managing both work and home was a daily struggle. Her mornings were rushed, evenings chaotic, and yet Bola always maintained a perfect smile for her employees and family. She believed she could handle everything, until the weight of responsibilities became too much. One day, after missing an important board meeting because of a spilled breakfast and a crying infant, Bola realized she needed help. The house chores were overwhelming, and her children demanded attention she didn't always have. That's when Becky appeared, a young, elegant, and seemingly perfect maid. She was highly recommended and came with glowing references. At first glance, Becky seemed like a blessing from above. Becky never made mistakes. Every room she entered sparkled, meals were perfectly prepared, and the children adored her immediately. Bola and her husband often remarked that she was too good to be true. Slowly, Becky became indispensable. She handled the house, managed the children, and even anticipated Bola's needs before she could ask. To the family, she appeared almost angelic, a miracle that made life effortless. Bola, relieved, felt she could finally breathe. The pressures of her CEO life and motherhood seemed manageable, and she could focus on growing UnHuman Tech Solutions without worrying about domestic chaos. But even as Becky seemed perfect, there were subtle oddities. Sometimes, Bola would catch her out of the corner of her eye, staring at the children for a little too long, smiling in a way that felt unsettling. The children, however, loved her without hesitation. The twins would laugh whenever Becky played with them. The older children eagerly helped her with chores. No one else seemed to notice the strange aura she carried. Despite her busy schedule, Bola never neglected her faith. She was a born-again Christian, devoted to God, and prayer was the anchor of her life. Every night, after putting the children to bed, she would kneel in her room and pray earnestly for her family, asking God to protect them from all harm and evil. Bola would pray over her children, declaring the blood of Jesus over them, asking for divine protection, wisdom, and favor in every area of their lives. She believed that no matter how perfect life seemed, only God could safeguard her family from unseen dangers. Her faith gave her strength to juggle the chaos of motherhood and the demands of running UnHuman Tech Solutions. Her prayers were powerful and consistent. Bola made it a point never to skip a night, believing that the spiritual shield she invoked over her home kept her children safe from harm. Yet, even in her devout life, she sensed that Becky's presence carried an unusual energy, one she couldn't explain. Bola dismissed it at first, thinking her exhaustion made her overthink. Becky, meanwhile, seemed unaffected by the spiritual presence that Bola carried. While Bola prayed, Becky often moved silently around the house, her face serene, her eyes oddly calculating at times. Bola continued her nightly rituals faithfully, praying over her children, their toys, the bedrooms, and even the kitchen, asking for protection against anything evil that might come their way. The family remained unaware of the small hints Bola noticed, trusting Becky completely. Even Bola's husband, impressed by Becky's efficiency, encouraged her to relax and let the maid handle everything. But deep inside, Bola's intuition whispered that all was not as perfect as it seemed. She couldn't shake the feeling that Becky's true nature was hidden beneath a flawless facade. Once Bola left the house to drop the other 3 children at school, Becky was left alone with the youngest child, a beautiful 6-month-old baby girl named Amara. As soon as the door clicked shut behind Bola, Becky's demeanor changed. Her innocent, angelic appearance melted away, revealing her true form, a witch with sharp horns, a beast-like leg, and a long, sinuous tail. Her eyes glowed red in the dim morning light, and a chilling smile crept across her face. She moved swiftly around the house, her movements unnatural and silent, yet precise. Becky began performing the house chores, but not as a human. The way she worked was otherworldly, her limbs moving unnaturally, her strength and speed far beyond that of a normal maid. As she moved, her power seemed to call others to her. Shadowy figures, members of her hidden world who looked like twisted versions of humans, started appearing from the corners of the house. They began feasting in the kitchen, laughing and whispering in eerie voices, enjoying the abundance of food and the house she controlled. Each bite they took seemed to drain the warmth from the room, leaving a cold, sinister energy behind. Becky, in her witch form, gently rocked baby Amara while keeping a watchful eye over her strange companions. The baby giggled innocently, unaware of the danger surrounding her, making the scene both chilling and surreal. The shadowy members obeyed Becky completely, performing tasks around the house at her command. The air felt heavy with power, and even the walls seemed to whisper secrets only Becky could understand. For Becky, this was her true life, a hidden world she could enter whenever humans were gone. A world of feasting, darkness, and obedience, yet balanced by her ability to blend perfectly into Bola's family when needed. By the time Bola returned home, the house appeared spotless, and Becky was back in her angelic form, smiling and humming as if nothing had happened. The sinister energy faded like a shadow at dawn, leaving no trace, except for a tiny shiver running down Bola's spine. She dressed neatly and headed out to pick up Bola's 3 older children from school. No one would ever suspect the truth. Bola, meanwhile, noticed something odd about Becky that she couldn't quite explain. At night, when she observed the maid sleeping, Becky's positions were unusual. Sometimes she would lie with her legs pressed against the wall. At other times, Bola caught her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness while she appeared to be asleep. The sight sent tiny shivers down Bola's spine, but she tried to dismiss it as just a strange habit. Nothing in the house was ever missing. No money, no jewelry, not even a tiny item was ever gone. Bola compared this to the stories she often heard from friends who constantly complained about maids stealing from them. In Bola's mind, Becky was perfect. She could not only manage the house flawlessly, but also take care of the children with love and patience. Bola often thanked God for blessing her with such a trustworthy maid. Her husband also praised Becky's work, impressed by her efficiency and the peaceful environment she maintained in the house. Bola began to relax, trusting Becky completely. Yet, deep down, Bola couldn't shake the subtle unease she felt whenever she saw Becky at night, lying in those awkward positions or staring silently into the darkness. Something about it whispered that all was not as it seemed. She convinced herself it was nothing. After all, the house was safe, the children were happy, and everything ran perfectly under Becky's care. Why worry about a few strange sleeping habits? Life carried on normally. Bola focused on growing Luminatech solutions. Her children thrived under Becky's supervision, and the household ran like a dream, at least on the surface. But the small hints Bola had noticed would soon begin to accumulate, leading to a terrifying discovery that no one could have imagined. The perfect maid might not be as angelic as she appeared. Bola's husband, Charles, had always been devoted to her, a loving and supportive partner. But slowly he began to feel an inexplicable attraction toward Becky, the seemingly perfect maid. It happened one quiet night. Becky walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Charles, returning from work late, saw her in the dim light and couldn't take his eyes off her. Something about Becky captivated him, a magnetic presence he couldn't explain. Her angelic facade hid a dangerous allure that seemed to pull Charles toward her. Before he realized it, Charles reached out and touched Becky's hand. The air around them seemed charged, almost electric, and the moment sparked something neither of them could control. That night, Becky and Charles found themselves alone in her room. What started as a subtle attraction escalated, and they made love in secrecy, hidden from Bola's eyes but under the same roof. Meanwhile, Bola was unaware of the scene unfolding in her own home. She thought Charles was resting in their room, completely oblivious to the dangerous temptation looming in her house. Becky's eyes glowed faintly red in the darkness, a subtle hint of her true nature, though Charles was completely unaware. Her supernatural presence made the night intoxicating, binding him under her spell. The following morning, Bola noticed nothing unusual. Becky was smiling, attending to the children, and Charles acted as if nothing had happened, though a small, unspoken tension lingered in the air. Bola's faith remained strong, but she could not yet sense the darkness that had crept into her home. The perfect maid was not only a witch, but also a temptress, subtly weaving her influence over the family. The house, still appearing perfect on the outside, held a secret no one could have imagined. Bola's intuition stirred faintly, a whisper of unease she couldn't yet fully understand. After everyone had left the house for the day, Becky transformed once again into her true form, summoning the shadowy spirits who followed her commands. The house was filled with an eerie, otherworldly glow. The spirits began feasting on the food Becky had prepared earlier, their laughter echoing through the empty halls, sending chills through the air. Among the shadows emerged a tall, imposing figure, Becky's spirit husband. His eyes burned with fury as he observed her. "Why did you give your body to this man?" he demanded in a voice that rattled the walls. "Your mission was clear. You were assigned to destroy this family, and now you are falling in love with him." Becky's expression flickered with a hint of guilt, but her red glowing eyes remained fierce. "I am completing my task," she whispered, "but he is different." Her spirit husband's rage intensified. "Different or not, your assignment was to wreak havoc. Allowing him to sleep with you weakens your mission. You are betraying your purpose." The other shadowy members murmured in agreement, their feasting pausing as they stared at Becky, waiting to see whether she would obey or succumb to her human emotions. Becky clenched her hands, feeling the pull between her duty as a witch and the strange affection growing for Charles. Her heart, a part she had long thought dormant, stirred in conflict. "You cannot let feelings interfere," her spirit husband hissed. "Destroy them as you were sent to. You have been powerful, but now your weakness could ruin everything." As the spirits continued their eerie feast, Becky's mind raced. She had to decide whether she would follow her dark assignment or yield to the forbidden feelings she was developing for Charles, the man she was supposed to use as a tool. Suddenly, Charles's call came in. His deep voice filled Becky's room. "Dear baby girl, I'm coming home right now. Prepare yourself for me." The moment she heard his voice, Becky froze. Her spirit husband's warning echoed in her mind. "Do not give in, you are falling in love. This will ruin everything." But before she could respond, the shadowy spirits surrounding her vanished into the darkness, leaving Becky alone to face her conflicting emotions. Not long after, Charles arrived at the house. His presence electrified the room, and he immediately closed the distance between them. Charles took Becky in his arms, his eyes full of longing. Before either of them could think, he began kissing her passionately, and Becky allowed herself to be swept away. The passion between them escalated quickly. Becky's human form masked the witch she truly was, while Charles was completely unaware of the darkness hidden within her. They made love in secrecy, a moment charged with both temptation and danger, the house quiet except for their whispered sighs. When it was over, Charles left for his office as if nothing had happened, unaware that he had just become further entangled in a web he couldn't see. Soon after, Bola returned home, exhausted from the day's work and errands. She walked through the house, noticing how clean and perfect everything was, as if Becky had magically restored the order of the day. Bola never noticed anything unusual that day. Her trust in Becky remained complete, her heart grateful to God for providing such a perfect maid, blissfully unaware of the secret storm that had just taken place in her own home. One morning, Bola's children rushed to her, their faces pale and trembling. "Mama, I had a dream," one of them exclaimed. "I saw a woman trying to drag me away." Bola's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively held her youngest child close, a beautiful 6-month-old baby boy named Elijah, and felt a surge of maternal protectiveness. Kneeling down beside Elijah's crib, Bola laid her hand gently on him and began to pray aloud, calling on the blood of Jesus to shield her children from all evil. She prayed fervently, covering Elijah and the other children, commanding any spirit or dark force to flee from their home. Bola's voice was firm, confident in the power of God to protect her family. The children watched, reassured by their mother's faith, as Bola's prayers seemed to fill the room with a warm, comforting light. "No one will harm you while I am here," Bola whispered to Elijah, pressing a soft kiss on his forehead. "God is our shield, and his blood will protect us." Despite her prayers, Bola couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that the warning from her children was a premonition, a glimpse into the danger that lurked closer than anyone could imagine. She glanced at Becky, who was quietly tending to household chores, her expression serene and seemingly innocent. Bola tried to dismiss the fear creeping into her mind. But deep down, Bola felt the darkness around her house growing stronger. Something about Becky, something hidden beneath her perfect facade, was not yet revealed. Bola resolved to pray even more diligently for Elijah and the other children, unknowingly preparing for a confrontation that would test her faith, courage, and the very safety of her family. That night, as usual, Charles went to Becky's room. Their secret meetings had become a regular part of his routine, a temptation he could no longer resist. They made love, consumed by the forbidden passion that had been building between them. Becky's red glowing eyes were hidden behind her human facade, her true power lying dormant, waiting. Afterward, Charles returned to his room, unaware that the night's actions had triggered forces far beyond his understanding. The following morning, chaos struck. Charles woke to excruciating pain and realized he could not move his legs. Panic overtook him as he tried to stand, only to collapse helplessly on the floor. Bola, frantic, rushed to his side. "Charles, what's happening?" she screamed, calling for help as fear gripped her heart. They immediately rushed him to the hospital. Doctors examined him thoroughly, running every test imaginable, but no physical cause could be detected. Everything seemed normal, yet he remained paralyzed. The paralysis baffled the doctors. "There's nothing physically wrong with him," one of them muttered, shaking his head. "We'll need to run more tests, but his body shows no signs of stroke or injury." Bola's heart sank. The fear she had tried to push aside now gripped her completely. Something unnatural had touched her husband, something beyond medical explanation. Deep down, Bola feared Becky. The maid who had seemed perfect was now entwined with a dark power she had yet to fully understand. As Charles lay helpless in the hospital bed, Bola whispered prayers over him, tears streaming down her face. She knew that only God's intervention could save her husband from the dark forces at work. While Charles remained paralyzed in the hospital, Bola was left juggling her demanding role as CEO of Lumina Tech Solutions and the care of her children, barely finding time to breathe. Becky, ever the perfect maid in appearance, quietly took full control of the household. She managed the children, the chores, and even Bola's schedule with unnerving precision. Bola, overwhelmed and exhausted, barely had time to see her children. She trusted Becky completely, grateful for her efficiency, yet unaware of the darkness lurking behind that perfect smile. Each day, Becky's control over the house, and subtly over the family, grew stronger. Her supernatural presence became more apparent to those with spiritual sensitivity, though Bola remained largely unaware. Even Elijah, the 6-month-old baby, seemed strangely drawn to Becky. Bola sometimes noticed subtle changes in the children's behavior, small signs that something was off, but she attributed them to stress and Charles's hospitalization. Night after night, Becky resumed her secret rituals once the house was empty. Shadowy spirits would appear, and feasts of darkness would take place in the quiet of the home, invisible to Bola and the children. Bola's prayers over her family became more fervent than ever, calling on the blood of Jesus to shield her loved ones. Yet, the veil of darkness Becky brought into the house was growing, threatening to break through if left unchecked. Her faith gave her strength, but even she felt the weight of exhaustion and fear. Managing a crisis at work, a paralyzed husband, and the household was pushing her to the brink. Becky, aware of Bola's struggles, seemed almost to relish the control she wielded, all while maintaining her angelic facade. The perfect maid was anything but harmless, and so the stage was set for a terrifying confrontation. the moment when Bola's faith, courage, and prayers would be tested against the true power of the witch who had infiltrated her home. The family's safety and even their lives hung in the balance. One morning, Bola left for work as usual. Her mind was heavy. Charles was still in the hospital, and her workload had doubled. She barely had time to sleep, but she held on to prayer as her strength. When she got to the office ready to present a major contract, she suddenly realized she had forgotten a very important document at home. Frustrated but rushed, she hurried back to the house. As she entered the compound, something felt off. The air was too still, the house too quiet, and then it came a strange sound. A sound no human should ever make. Deep growling, almost like a beast chewing or breathing heavily. Bola froze. Her heart thumped painfully in her chest. She tiptoed inside, following the sound that seemed to echo from her baby Elijah's room. When she reached the doorstep, her hands trembled as she slowly pushed the door open, just a little. What she saw nearly stopped her heart. Becky was sitting on the bed with Elijah, but she was no longer human. Two sharp horns grew from her head. Her eyes glowed a terrifying blood red. A long tail moved behind her like a serpent. One of her legs had transformed into that of a beast. Bola screamed, "Jesus!" The power of the name burst into the room like fire. Instantly, Becky transformed back into her human form, calm, clean, innocent looking. But Bola had already seen the truth. The perfect maid was a monster. Tears filled Bola's eyes. "So, you're a witch," she whispered, shaking from fear and anger. "Becky, what have I done to you? Why bring darkness into my home? Why my family?" Becky didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she looked Bola straight in the eye and said coldly, "I was sent by the kingdom of darkness to destroy you." Becky's red glowing eyes flickered as she confessed, "Bola, your prayers have hindered me from destroying you. I tried to touch your children, to harm them, but every night when you pray and lay your hands on them, I see a ring of fire around them. I cannot do anything." She stepped closer, her voice filled with both frustration and fear. "I even tried to poison your food. Every time I placed poison in it, your prayers would make it leap out, powerless to harm you. Everything I did became ineffective because of your faith." Bola, trembling but determined, took a deep breath. "So all this time it was your darkness against my prayers, and God kept us safe." Becky's expression darkened. "Yes, that is why I was sent by the kingdom of darkness, to destroy your family, scatter your destiny, and paralyze your husband. But your nightly prayers, your hands laid on your children, your faith, it protected everything I tried to ruin." Bola clutched baby Elijah close to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "God has always been with us. I prayed to him every night for my children's protection, and he has kept us safe." Becky hissed, her tail lashing behind her. "You are too strong, Bola. Your spirit burns me. I am powerless here because of you. The angels you call in your prayers, they chase me away every time I attempt anything." Bola took a step forward, her eyes blazing with courage. "Becky, I am not afraid. You may be a witch, but God is greater than you. My children, my family, they belong to him, not to darkness." Becky trembled violently, unable to hide the fear now creeping into her face. You are protected by a power I cannot fight. I was supposed to destroy you, but I cannot not hear, not while you pray." Bola whispered prayers over Elijah and her other children, the warmth of faith filling the room, the shadows Becky had summoned trembling and fading. With a final shiver, Becky's glowing eyes dimmed, her horns and tail slowly retreating, leaving her as a human once more, her power broken by the prayers Bola had faithfully said every night. Bola stood tall, her faith stronger than ever, realizing that no darkness could prevail against the blood of Jesus and a mother's love. Becky's voice shook as she confessed fully, her tone a mixture of fear and remorse. "I was able to capture your husband, Bola, because he could not control his lust. He made love with me, and I gave him his sickness. This should be a lesson for husbands. Sleeping with their housemaid is dangerous. Not every maid is human." Bola's eyes burned with a mixture of anger and sadness, but she remained calm. Becky, your time here is over. You've caused enough pain. Becky, now trembling and powerless, fell to her knees and began to beg Bola for mercy. Please have mercy on me. I was sent by the kingdom of darkness, but I am sorry for everything I've done. Bola raised her hands and said a prayer, calling on God's power to send Becky back to where she came from. Light filled the room as the witch slowly disappeared, leaving the house finally free of darkness. Bola went to the hospital to inform Charles, who was still weak but alive. Your sickness is over, she said. God has healed you, and you have learned a very important lesson. Respect your family, protect your marriage, and never allow lust to lead you astray again. Charles, now fully repentant, embraced Bola, tears flowing down his cheeks. He understood the gravity of his mistake and the power of the spiritual forces that had been at work. The house returned to peace. Bola's children were safe, Elijah and the others thriving under their mother's loving care. But one thing remained true. Finding another maid like Becky, who was so obedient and skilled, proved almost impossible, and Bola realized the value of careful judgment in whom she trusted. From that day on, Bola strengthened her faith even more, teaching her children to pray, to respect God, and to recognize that not every person or situation is what it seems. The moral was clear. Prayer, faith, and vigilance protect your family. Temptation and hidden evil can lurk even in those who seem perfect, but steadfast faith and obedience to God will overcome darkness. Bola never forgot the lesson she learned that year. That trust must be earned, temptation has consequences, and prayer is a shield stronger than any force of evil. Her family thrived, her faith deepened, and though she struggled to find another maid, she knew that God's protection was the greatest gift she could ever have.